Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Sunday Night SitDown, brought to you by One Head Power, where we have conversations with local officials and candidates to get to know them better on a personal level. The Sunday Night SitDown is just a relaxed conversation that we have, and we are very honored and fortunate to sit down with, our at-large county council person, Bethany Hallam, who has been taking the county by storm since her unprecedented win and run a couple of years ago. So welcome to the Sunday Night Sit-Down, Bethany Hallam.
Thanks, Miracle. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're so excited, so happy that you're joining us. And we're going to start off, talk about what brought you here, some policy, and then we talk about the end, what brings you joy. So for people who don't know, or for even people who may already know you, what caused you to get into politics?
So I'd always had an interest in politics and really just like serving my community and the people that I love. And then whenever I had started to get involved, I realized that it wasn't just a passion, but a calling. And so my experiences in my life leading up to running for office were really what were the determining factors in, okay, I have to run. I had had dozens of people tell me to do it prior to actually making the decision. But I brought what I saw as baggage at the time. I was formerly incarcerated. I was in recovery from opioid use disorder. And there were a bunch of pieces of my life that I thought were kind of disqualifying from running for office. And I'm so fortunate that I have great people in my life who pushed me in the direction of those things are not only not disqualifying, but they're actually all the more reason why you should get involved to help amplify voices of people with similar backstories in similar situations. So that's how I got here today.
And you have been, very transparent about, quote unquote, the baggage you thought you carried. Why was it so important for you to let people know who you were from the get-go and to do so in such an unapologetic way?
Well, first of all, I have a really bad memory. Okay. So I knew that anything that I didn't just tell the 100% truth about, I wasn't going to remember anyways. Right. So it was really easy for me to just say, hey, listen, I am just going to be myself unapologetically. I'm going to dress how I want to dress, talk about the things that are important to me, and bring my experiences to the table in the hopes that I'm able to inspire others to run for office and help people who maybe found themselves in similar situations that I found myself in. And so that was my one rule from the beginning is I'm going to be me. I am going to tell my whole story and not leave any pieces out. And it'll be up to the voters to decide if they're willing to accept me as I am or not.
And one of those issues you've been really passionate about has been the Allegheny County Jail. You're on the jail oversight board. How did you get on the board, and what are the functions that the board is supposed to be accomplishing?
Right. So in 2016, I was incarcerated in the Allegheny County Jail. And now here I am 5 years later, sitting on the jail oversight board, which to me is one of the most mind-blowing aspects of it all, is because I am in a position to be able to protect the health and well-being of the people in the Allegheny County Jail. Now, unfortunately, it's not up to me to do those things myself, or I think things would be going a little differently in that jail than they are right now. But the jail actually is statutorily mandated by a Pennsylvania statute to have a jail oversight board that is comprised of 3 community members who are appointed by the county executive himself or herself, the president judge, the county controller, the county sheriff, and the president of county council. The president of county council is allowed to have a designee on the board, only he and the president judge are actually allowed to send somebody instead of themselves. And our president of council, Councilman Pat Katina, chose me to be his designee. So I attend the meetings in place of him. And we've got, I mean, I can't lie, because that's where I've gotten most of my accomplishments so far as a council member, is I've realized that a 15-member legislative body has been difficult to work within whenever myself and maybe one or two other members of council have really been the driving force introducing legislation. The Jail Oversight Board is a 9-member body. And so we're able to bring in experts to testify to the other members of the board. We're able to conduct unannounced surprise jail visits. We're able to get input from the public on what's going on with their loved ones in the jail. And so I really do think that a lot of the work that I've been able to do has come through the Jail Oversight Board. One of the things I'm most proud of is that since the pandemic started, every month I introduce 2 separate motions to the Jail Oversight Board, and it's for $50 on the commissary accounts of every person on the board, and $50 can I say that again? $50 on the commissary accounts of every person in the jail, and $50 on the tablet accounts of every person in the jail. So $100 per person per month to everybody in the jail to help them stay in contact with their loved ones, to help them make sure they have adequate nutrition, which often has to come from commissary because of the lack of adequate meals they're provided from the jail. So that's something I'm really proud of, but we just have so much more work to do there.
Yeah, and I know that there are people who said that they hadn't talked to like their loved ones in months, and now that these motions are being passed and approved by the board, they're actually able to engage and talk to loved ones. So there is like that direct immediate impact. In addition to being on the Jail Oversight Board, you also serve on the election. How is that going? Because we are one of the second largest counties in Pennsylvania. So you're really in charge of thousands of people's votes at a time where it's very contentious to be a election official.
I can tell you that 2020 sure gave me a run for my money. I had experienced a lot of threats from people who believed that the election was fraudulent. I would say that that is another part of my job that I very much enjoy, not the threats per se, but actually being on the board of elections, because I realized that every policy piece that we're fighting for, every candidate that we're supporting, everything that is important, if our elections are not safe, secure, and accessible, and if people can't vote without obstacle, then our elections are not truly a representative democracy of the people who these elected officials are elected to represent. And so that's a lot of what my work is on the Board of Elections. And I'm so fortunate that there are so many amazing grassroots organizations who have put election security and accessibility in the forefront of their missions. Because, for example, in the 2020 election, we had drop boxes and satellite voting locations. We had mail-in voting open to everyone for the first time ever in Pennsylvania. We had so many things that everyone thought, these are amazing. These have made elections so much more accessible to people who maybe don't have the ability to take off work on election day, who maybe don't have access to childcare, who maybe don't have transportation to get to their polling place on election day. All of these new things that we got in 2020 seemed like the solution. And then here we are in 2021, all the things we learned in 2020, it seems that the county administration is throwing out the window and saying, we don't need those this year. We know they worked, but we're not willing to do them again. And that's what I have to fight against every day.
And talking about like fighting against, you are one of the newer elected members locally. You've come in, kind of tried to do like a working council. How has that transition been? Because traditionally, you had some legislation may or may not have been passed. People went home, but you're calling these hearings. You and like Liv Bennett are introducing legislation almost every week. So how has that transition been?
It has been frustrating because I wanted it to be a collaborative model. I wanted to work with my colleagues and I wanted it to all be done together. But it turns out that even though county council is officially a part-time role, there are some of us that treat county council as more than a part-time role, as more than a full-time role. And there are so many members of council who don't even give it part of their time, who maybe show up to the meetings and nothing else, who have no intention of legislating, but instead place holding a seat and preventing someone who is willing to legislate, who is willing to do the work, from actually coming on and being part of that coalition. So I'd say that that's probably the most frustrating part. I truly thought I could come in and just use my logic and rationale to get everyone to understand why it's important that we are not only a transparent and accessible legislative body, but also that we legislate. I never fathomed that my biggest obstacle wasn't the fact that we didn't have a majority, because my party has a 12-3 majority on council, but it was more so getting even members of my own party on county council to be willing to do the work that it needs to take, to be willing to make decisions that are sometimes tough, instead of letting bills die in committee so that they never have to come up for a vote and they never have to take a stand on the issue. That has definitely been frustrating, but all I know is that I cannot control other people, but I can control myself, and I can't control the actions that I take to make county council more accessible to folks. I want people to know what county council is. I want people to know who their county council member is. I want people to know what legislation we're discussing, because it affects all 1.3 million residents of Allegheny County. Even if your county council member only represents one district, they're still making votes that affect every single person in this county. A lot of these seats go unchallenged every time they're up. A lot of these seats change hands between parties every few terms. So these county council seats that are up in the odd year elections, which we have one coming up this year, it's just so important that people know what we're doing, so that they are motivated to turn out and vote and have a say with who's representing them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you have, in the past, actively been recruiting and engaging people to take a more, proactive stance in elections. And this year, we see a lot of people running, third party, independent individuals. A lot of people are engaging the system. What do you hope for the future of Allegheny County when it comes to these elections?
Well, Miracle, it depends how much time we have, because I have a lot of plans for the future of Allegheny County. But specifically as it pertains to these elections, I think it was a lot of what I just spoke on, is just understanding that these are legislators. This is the legislative branch of our government. Everyone's familiar with the county executive, and unfortunately it is true, we do operate under a county charter that has a strong executive, weaker council model, but it does not have an all-powerful executive and a no-power council model. So just getting people in the seats who are willing to take a chance. Sometimes you're going to pass a piece of legislation that may get challenged in court, and that's okay. That's what we have a legal team for. Sometimes you're going to introduce a piece of legislation for the betterment of the residents of this county, and half of the county is going to hate you for it. That is part of the job. If you are not willing to take the difficult parts of being a legislator, then move over, because there are so many people out there who would love your job. And so that's why I think the education aspect is such a big component, because a lot of times we hear people shaming folks for not voting in elections, especially odd year, especially local municipal level elections. But instead of shaming people for not voting, maybe we should spend more time trying to understand why people aren't participating in those elections. Is it because they don't have the ability to get to the polls and vote twice a year every year? Because that's possible. Is it because they don't have childcare to be able to watch their kids for however long it takes them to get to their polling place and then back? Is it because they simply aren't informed on what are the offices that are up? What does a borough council member do? What does a city council member do? What does a constable do? What does a magisterial district judge do? All of these things are positions that are on the ballot right now, where we're projected to have maybe 20 to 30% turnout. That is not okay, because these are races where these people are holding these seats for years to come, and we need to make sure that every voter has what they need to feel comfortable making a selection for the best candidate for the job, because that's the only way that we move Allegheny County and county council into the future, is to make sure that we're electing the right people to be the ones legislating the laws in our county.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know council has been, very busy with some of the legislation, whether it was kind of passing the local Crown Act to helping with various healthcare and insurance and getting the paid leave, like for the employees. There still has been a discussion around like policing in the county, these less lethal, more lethal munitions. How was it having those conversations? And do you feel like you're making any leeway yet for people to understand why why people are asking for these less lethal weapons to be banned in the county? Got them similar, kind of almost banned in the jail, but not necessarily in the county.
Right, and that is a great question because I often have to remind myself that we are making progress sometimes when it comes to those things, because a lot of the issues that we're debating in county council, and I've been doing a lot of the work with my colleague, Councilwoman Olivia Bennett, because we ran for these seats together. We ran on very similar platforms, and so I'm fortunate that I don't have to go at a lot of these issues by myself. I have her alongside me to do it. I do think that the most crucial learning piece for any piece of legislation, especially when it comes to policing and addressing those sort of issues in our county, is the committee meetings. That's the working group. That's where all of the nuts and bolts are of every piece of legislation. And yet a lot of folks show up to the full council meetings and don't even know about the committee meetings that are going on behind closed doors. But in any legislative process, that's where most of the work is happening. And so we've been getting some great experts coming to give testimony to all of the council members about their area of expertise, a lot of it being, policing and the use of less lethal force. But it's just about getting the public to also participate as well. So we've been fortunate that we've had a lot of different grassroots organizations who have mobilized around these issues alongside us, but we just need our colleagues to be more willing to come to committee meetings and learn and ask questions and to come into every issue with an open mind. There is a lot of an age divide on county council right now, and I think that has been a barrier, is to convince some of the more tenured members of council to kind of get with the times and see things from a new age perspective, that maybe these things were okay for you 50 years ago, but now our community members are being injured and dying at the hands of police officers, and these quote unquote less lethal weapons are killing people and seriously injuring folks. So it's really something that we need to talk about to make sure that everybody is up to date and knowing this is what's going on, because that's the only way we can stop it, is by educating our colleagues and educating our community members on why this need is so great.
Thank you for that. And it seems like there's so much going on. So on top of all of this, you actually announced recently that you are starting law school. So how has that journey been for you, and what are some of the things that you hope law school is able to teach you and skills it's able to help you develop?
Yeah, it's been my dream my whole life to go to law school, and again, it was another thing, just like running for office, that I thought was out of the cards for me because of some of the things that I've experienced in my past. And being in this role now has made me realize that nothing is off limits. Anything that you put your mind to, you can do. And so I am about 2 months into law school, and I love every minute of it. It definitely keeps me busy. I work a full-time job. I'm on county council and the jail oversight board and the board of elections, and I'm going to law school. So it has really helped with my time management. And I realized that I've learned to prioritize things that are important and make sure to always put myself first when it comes to taking care of my mental health and well-being, while at the same time being responsible for making sure that 1.3 million residents of Allegheny County are doing all right too, because that is what I consider the most important job I've ever had. So I'm really enjoying it. And at the end of the day, I realize that I'll be a better legislator when I understand the background of the laws that we're discussing, when I understand the history of our criminal legal system, more than just from a firsthand perspective or from having conversations about it with community members, but actually inserting myself to it at the other side of the case than I found myself in previous interactions with the legal system. So I'm learning a lot. I'm really excited about it. And every day I learn something that is applicable to my role as a county council member, my role as a legislator. And it's just so rewarding. And I'm so lucky to have this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited to see like what you do and how you manage. Like when you were like, I'm in, I was like, how does she do it? Like, because you've also made it your kind of your mission to be out and about in the county, to show up at different events, to host different events, while you're in community. And how important is it to you to still maintain those connections, as you start this new chapter in your life?
Oh, it's the most important thing in the world. I just recently tore my ACL in a pogo stick accident, and so I'm crutching around the world now, or around the county now, and so that has definitely added a little twist to my getting around and doing everything that I need to do. But at the end of the day, that is the most important role that I have. It's not talking to people, but going around and listening to people. It's not just showing up at political events, but going into the community and talking to folks. It's not just showing up once every 4 years when your name's on the ballot, but building those relationships continuously, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, so that when you are up on the ballot, you know what you need to be fighting for because you've been cultivating those relationships in your community for all that time. You know what the community wants to see. And even more so, you know the condition in the situation because there are 130 municipalities in Allegheny County, and every municipality has neighborhoods within it. And every neighborhood has its own different character and different needs and wants and personalities. And so the only way to understand that is to constantly be out there. And that's the one thing, whether I'm an elected official or not, that I'm going to be out doing. It's what I was doing before I was in this role. It's what I enjoy doing even after it. So
Yeah, and I like that. And you talk about being out and about in the county. I know last month it was, the National Recovery Month, and you had hosted some events. How important is it to you to inspire people to know that there is, life with no addiction disorder and life after? And what are some of the changes you wish Allegheny County could do to help people who are living with addiction disorder right now?
that is another thing I could talk to you about in its own show, Miracle. But I think that it's important that people understand that everybody's recovery looks differently, and that's okay too. When I was in early recovery, or even before I really truly started my recovery journey, I was always under the impression every rehab facility I went to, every room I was in, that there was only one way, and it was a fully abstinence-based, strict 12-step program. And I've had so many people whose lives have been saved by Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. And it just wasn't for me. And I kept feeling over and over again like I was a failure because of that. Like I was never going to experience all the amazing things that recovery brings because it never clicked for me, the 12-step program. And so when I go around and I talk to people, especially during recovery month, but all the time, I really stress harm reduction. And I think that that's what Allegheny County's focus needs to be on so that we can curb the overdose deaths that are happening almost every single day in our region. And it seems like over the past year and a half, a lot of the overdose epidemic has been kind of lost in the eyes of this COVID-19 pandemic that we've all been experiencing. And so that's why I try to use my position to be constantly talking about my recovery, because I know that if even one person can be affected by it and who can feel differently because they hear my story, who can feel compelled to be safe or to begin their recovery journey, that's a win to me. If even one more person decides to start carrying Narcan around with them everywhere they go and ends up reversing an overdose, that's a win. If we have more people, more mainstream public servants, elected officials, organizations out there talking about, safe injection sites and needle exchange programs and just increased access to Narcan, all of these different things that keep people safe, fentanyl test strips, making these readily available to people. Because what we're seeing is we have regulated drugs such as alcohol and now cannabis, and people aren't dying from those things at the rate that we're losing people to the drugs that are still heavily regulated, and folks are figuring out ways around the regulation, and that's how we're getting unsafe supply. That's how people are losing their life to overdose. And that overcoming that is really a way to end the stigma in general about folks with opioid use disorder and substance use disorder with other substances. So I spend a lot of my time talking about harm reduction and just trying to make sure that everybody knows that there are ways that we need to keep people safe while they're using until they are ready to begin their recovery journey, and then have the resources there for them then. It's a warm handoff between services.
Yes, thank you so much. And you mentioned the fentanyl test strips. We know recently the city put out, kind of advisory that will allow fentanyl test strips to be decriminalized in the city. Is there any movement on the county side for this? Is that legislation that's pending, or is that just something that right now people haven't been able to agree on?
So it's something that I've been discussing with our staff at County Council to figure out if that ability to do that is able to happen from County Council, if it needs to come from the Health Department, because we have the Allegheny County Health Department, which is unique to us. Not every county has a health department. The city of Pittsburgh does not have a health department. So we need to find out how is the best way to go about that. And if it's not us legislating it ourselves, then it's about having conversations with the folks at the health department, with the county executive, and asking them to move forward on it, and knowing that we'll use our platforms to follow their lead and advocate for everyone to have fentanyl test strips on them wherever possible. But I was so excited to see the news from the city making that decision, because especially we've been hearing a lot of reports of cocaine being laced with fentanyl around the Pittsburgh area lately. And so folks who maybe aren't used to ingesting opioids and maybe don't have Narcan on them or have it readily available at somewhere that they are, they're being exposed to fentanyl and needing Narcan and not having it. And so being able to make sure fentanyl test strips are there, a quick dip it in the drugs, find out what it is, and be able to use drugs safely is really what it's all about.
Yeah, I think that that's something that a lot of people weren't aware of, and the cost effectiveness of like these strips being available and getting them at the local pharmacy. So I think that it's like you said, it really is helping to save people's lives and helping people to make informed decisions. And I know we only have a few more minutes before you have to go because you're like super busy. But when you're looking at county council and looking at the demographics, we know that people are looking at, do we need to change, the city precincts? The census came out. Is there any conversation right now about what the districts may look like on county council, or do you know if they're just going to stay the same due to the population changes with the recent census?
So they won't stay the same. We will go through the same redistricting process that you hear at all the different levels of government. I mean, my understanding is that redistricting will happen all the way down to the very local precinct level. So it will happen on county council. And some of my colleagues have been working on legislation to actually form the redistricting committee that will exist, that will be people who will decide what the county council districts are. So I'm excited for that process to happen. We are waiting for all of the information that's needed in order to do our redistricting. We do have a deadline for when that will happen by. It will not, again, impact this year's elections because they're already in the process, but it will impact our 2023 county council races. So, but I'm at large, so my district isn't changing.
Yeah, and when it comes to the nomination process for that redistricting committee, is it anyone in the county who's eligible to be nominated, or is it going to be the county executive appointing people and then the council verifying them by a vote? Do you know?
It'll be a split. If you remember how we did the civilian police review board kind of breakdown, it's similar to that, whereas different council members have different folks that they can appoint. The county executive has a set number of people that he can appoint, but everyone does need to live within Allegheny County to be eligible to be on the redistricting committee.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for that. I think we've covered a lot in such a short amount of time, and I'm just always in awe of everything that you're doing. And our traditional wrap up, we always ask people, what brings them joy. But so as you wrap up, can you let people know how they can get in contact with you if they have any questions about council, and the close with what brings you joy?
Absolutely. So I try to be the most accessible elected official out there. You can slide into my DMs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's at Bethany Hallam on all of the platforms. You can email me at bethany.hallam@alleghenycounty.us, and you can just stop me on the street and tell me what's on your mind. I'm here to serve you. I am a public servant, and so it brings me joy to be able to serve my community and to know when people reach out and tell me, hey, that bill you introduced, that really meant a lot to me, or hey, that paid sick leave legislation you passed, that's going to change my family's lives. That's what brings me joy. And that is how, throughout all the stress, all the turmoil, as busy as I am, that's how I sleep great at night, is just knowing that any person that's affected by something that I or my colleagues do, it brings me so much joy that I can't even measure it.
Yeah, and I know it says last question, but next last question. You have started this Watch Bethany Eat trends, which I've always been a super fan of. What are some of the restaurants that you have been really excited to eat now that places are back open, and what has been some of the best places you've eaten in the past few weeks?
Oh, that's hard. Okay. Two Sisters, Two Sons, if you're into Caribbean food, getting a little kick. Dia Noya's, if Italian food is your jam. But my guilty pleasure is McDonald's. I go there probably 5 times a week. So
I went to their headquarters, and I was just like,
went all the way to Chicago to go to Hamburger University. Yep.
I was like, I tasted all of this food. I was like, but I want more for you. But the fact that you love McDonald's, it's just, they say we that you guys stay true to who we are. And at your heart, you're just McDonald's.
It's who I am. They actually tweeted at me the other day, and it really made my day. I couldn't believe it. So
maybe you can get your own sweetie meal. That could be we're just gonna keep pushing you out there.
I already know what my meal would be. So
oh my, what?
Yep.
I just what would it be?
So 2 double cheeseburgers, plain, add mac sauce, shredded lettuce, diced onions. You're getting 2 Big Macs for basically $2, a large fry, a 4-piece nugget, a Diet Coke, some sweet and sour sauce, and ketchup.
All right. On that note, thank you so much for joining our Sunday Night Sit Down. We hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, Miracle. It was great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right, and that has been this week's edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down, where we again try to take away the mystique of politics and talk to elected officials directly, figure out who they are, what inspires them to run, what brings them joy, and what future they have for the work that they're planning. So join us back next Sunday, same time, 7 p.m. And in addition, this is the last week. Please make sure you have registered to vote. Registration is October 18th. That date is right around the corner. We're basically less than a week away. So please, please, please make sure you're registered to vote. And we will see you back here, same time, next Sunday. Have a good night.